Está começando mais um episódio do Torá com Fritas, o podcast kasher do conteúdo judaico. Eu sou o Moré Theo Hotz, historiador, hebraísta e integrante do Rabinato da CIP.
Eu sou Angela Goldstein, orientalista e mergulhadora.
Bom, já vocês vão notar que o episódio de hoje está um pouquinho diferente. A primeira coisa é que, infelizmente, o Theo não está participando da gravação de hoje. A gente já tinha marcado e desmarcado com esse convidado mais de uma vez. No fim, acabou aparecendo um contratempo de última hora. E aí a gente preferiu não adiar. E então a gravação vai ser só comigo e com o nosso convidado. E a segunda coisa é que este é o nosso episódio de número 99. Então a gente vai fazer uma coisa um pouquinho diferente antes do próximo episódio de número 100, que eu acho que vocês vão gostar bastante. Que esse vai ser o nosso primeiro episódio em outra língua. Sim, esse vai ser o nosso primeiro episódio em inglês, porque o nosso convidado é americano e não fala português. Já, mas eu não falo inglês, não vou entender. Torcedores, calma. Para quem não tiver com disposição de encarar uma hora de podcast em outra língua, eu vou fazer a transcrição e a tradução do episódio, e isso vai ser enviado como newsletter para quem apoia o Torá financeiramente. Então, se você ainda não nos apoia, esse é o momento de fazer isso. Só procurar em catarse.me/Torá com Fritas e escolher uma das faixas de apoio. Mas, então, para a gente falar sobre o tema de hoje, que é o apoio que alguns setores evangélicos dão aos judeus e essa aliança que vai acontecendo, a gente convidou o rabino Joshua Garroway, que também é meu professor daquele curso de mestrado que eu estou fazendo no HUC, sobre o qual a gente falou em alguns episódios atrás. Então, a partir de agora, estamos sem tecla SAP e acabou a versão brasileira Herbert Richards. Vamos para o inglês. Well, for those of you who don't speak any Portuguese and are listening to Torah with Chips for the first time, I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Angela Goldstein. I've been co-hosting this podcast for over 3 years now. And aside from hosting the podcast,
I am also a student at the Z School for Jewish Nonprofit Management in Los Angeles, even though I live in Brazil, but the course is online, so that's not an issue. So today we're very happy to welcome our first ever international guest to have our first ever episode in a different language, which is Rabbi Dr. Joshua Garroway, who happens to be my professor at HUC and has kindly accepted our invitation to have a conversation with us about the relationship between evangelicals and Jews and ways that they have been making a move towards us for the past few years. So, Josh, as we always do when we have a guest over, I'll please ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners, and please.
Sure. My name is Joshua Garroway, and I teach at the Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles. Among the many programs there is the Zelikow School for Nonprofit Jewish Management, which is how I got to know Angela. I've been teaching there for 16 or 17 years now. I was actually ordained at the Hebrew Union College on its Cincinnati campus, and I was encouraged to become an academic rabbi. So I went off and did a PhD, and they hired me back 5 years later, and I've been a part of the seminary ever since. While I teach largely in the world of Jewish history and Jewish texts, my area of training and where I publish is in early Christian studies, specifically around the Apostle Paul. Sao Paulo, I guess is the right way of putting that.
Yes.
So I assume that's why I'm here to talk about this subject today.
Very good. Thank you very much for joining. And so to start off, so we've been talking about Judaism on this podcast for the past 3 and something years. But we haven't really tackled Christianity, even though we have 2 episodes on Cristãos Novos, the conversos, and the Inquisition. But I think the first thing we could try and make a difference is, what is an evangelical Christian and how does it differ from a Catholic Christian? Because in Brazil, even though evangelicals have been growing for the past years, Catholics are still the majority in the country.
Yeah, so that's a tricky question because what evangelical Christian means is not clear. It's especially not clear in the United States. And I'm guessing that what it is in Brazil or in the nations of Africa or somewhere else is probably different from what it is in the US. And there also is a lack of certainty on what they are in those other countries. So it's very difficult to define over and against Catholic Christians because are presumably a part of the broader institution of the Catholic Church, which has as its head the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. And then there is a series of bishoprics, a series of dioceses in which the bishops of the world oversee the Catholic Church. And if you are a part of that community, then you are, putatively at least, a Catholic. In a place like the U.S. or other countries where there are prominent Protestant communities, then there are, Baptists and Methodists and Episcopalians that all have their own governing organizations to a greater or lesser extent and different ideas about important Christian topics or Christian ideas. But evangelical Christians are often, that term is used to describe Christians who are not a part of either the Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox churches or a part of any of the well-organized Protestant communities in a place like the U.S. The problem with that definition is that evangelical itself just means gospel. So an evangelical Christian is just a gospel Christian. And often that means a person who is interested in spreading the gospel. So you can be a Catholic and say, I'm evangelical. In America, one of the major Lutheran movements is called the Evangelical Lutheran Community. So they call themselves evangelical, but by and large, when we use the term evangelical, at least in the U.S., we're often referring to Christians of a recent vintage who are typically not associated with either the Catholic Church or one of what we call the mainline Protestant churches. They're Christians who are often very interested in spreading the message of Jesus and getting converts. They tend in America to be very interested in American politics and typically on the conservative side of American politics. And like I said, they tend to congregate in churches that are not a part of broader institutional structures, but are very much interested in what we call here a congregationalist structure, where each individual congregation has its own authority and doesn't answer to some, presbytery or Catholic church or bishop. They're just their own little community. So that's what evangelical Christian means, I think, in the way you're asking. But we just have to be careful about distinguishing it from other things that evangelical can mean.
Yeah, thank you. I'd say it is very similar to what you mean in Portuguese, or what we have in Brazil as a reality. But we don't, as you said, that there is no such broader or higher institution that they respond to. But some of these churches in Brazil, they have become very large. I think maybe in the US is the same.
Yeah, in the US, we often call them mega churches, where 5,000-10,000 people go on a Sunday to hear a really charismatic preacher.
There is a very big one in São Paulo called Solomon's Temple, which belongs to one of these denominations because they have different names. I think I've already told the story on a previous episode, but once when I was coming back from Thailand to Brazil, I had a connection in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. And on the gate to São Paulo, there was a group of 40-something people, and they all had this scarf with Mozambique, the name of the country, printed on it. And at first I thought they were a sports team or something, they were coming for a competition. But I said, I noticed they have very different ages, and usually when it's a sports team, they usually are of the same age. So at some point I couldn't help myself, and curiosity got the better side of me, and I asked them, I'm sorry, but are you all headed to São Paulo? Because Mozambique is also a Portuguese-speaking country. And they said, yes, we're going to São Paulo. I said, do you mind if I ask, what are you doing there? And they were coming to visit this temple in São Paulo. And I thought that was crazy because it's a long and expensive trip from Mozambique to Brazil. So you have to make a connection from Maputo in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia and then come to São Paulo, which is a long flight. And I was very surprised by that. So we do have that. And in Brazil, many of these people call themselves also neo-Pentecostal evangelicals. We also have that denomination. And same as you said in the US, they're very interested in...
You know what neo-Pentecostal means?
Not very much, and I'd like you to cover that concept as well.
I don't know what neo-Pentecostal is, except that it means new Pentecostal, and I know what Pentecostalism is. So Pentecostalism is a 20th century, I think, Christian phenomenon that emerged within the Methodist Church, which is related to the Anglican Church, Henry VIII. If you know that story, it's not that important. But it's a kind of modern Christianity that is really charismatic because it believes that in the context of a Christian community, a person can be imbued with prophetic gifts that allow them to speak in tongues. Meaning, you're in Sao Paulo, but somehow you're just speaking a bizarre language that someone walks up and says, oh my gosh, you're speaking Mandarin Chinese. How is that possible? Well, it would only be possible if the Holy Spirit was visiting you and allowing you to do that. And the origin of that, the reason why it's called Pentecostal, is something Jews should know, because you might know that, we have Passover, and then we count 7 weeks, 49 days, and the next week, the 50th day. After that, the 50th day is the holiday of Shavuot. And so in antiquity, Shavuot, weeks in Hebrew, was called Pentecost, meaning the 50th day after Passover. And in the New Testament, very early on in the book of Acts, there's a story where the earliest disciples are all together in Jerusalem in a synagogue with Jews from all over the world who are visiting for the Pentecost holiday. And the Holy Spirit comes in the room and they all start speaking in foreign tongues. And that's one of the first great pieces of evidence that Christianity is true and that the Holy Spirit is in this community. And so that Pentecost or Pentecostalism is very much associated in Christianity with speaking in tongues. But if you're familiar with Pentecostals, oftentimes the gifts of the Spirit that they claim to have in their communities goes beyond just speaking in tongues. Sometimes it involves various kinds of healing and other things. I think it was made famous, I could be wrong here, but in America more recently with Sarah Palin, who was the vice presidential candidate some time ago under John McCain. I guess that would have been 2012. And I think she is from a Pentecostal-like community in Alaska where they have these kinds of prophetic gifts in their church community, including speaking in tongues. So neo-Pentecostal presumably just means a newer version of that modern charismatic Christianity.
Yeah. But I just find it funny because they call themselves, you have like Pentecostal churches and neo-Pentecostal churches. That's what they call themselves. And as you said, in America, same in Brazil, they're very both interested in politics and lean towards a more conservative view of the world.
Yeah. And I assume are charismatic, meaning you go to a Catholic church and it's quiet and there's smells and bells and beautiful things. If you go to one of these churches, it's woo, that kind of thing.
Then songs and there is a band and young people play in the band. So that's a way to engage younger people coming to the church. The Catholic Church had a makeover in Brazil around the late 80s, early 90s, I think, where they had the charismatic renewal in the Catholic Church in Brazil, where they tried to have like more singing and not a very traditional kind of singing, but a more modern and appealing kind of music.
Yeah. In the States, we have an expression, not your grandfather's church.
Yes, that. Yeah.
They were trying to make it
more modern way.
Yeah.
But a very, very, very conservative way of seeing the world. They are becoming more influential in the politics in Brazil. They're being voted for the legislative. I think it's different. The systems are different between Brazil and America, but we call them like a congressman. Yeah, they're becoming
political
like
power is political power. It doesn't really matter what the system is. Yeah,
exactly. I was just trying to find the right way to convey that. But so they've been elected to the Congress, and just a few months ago they tried to pass a bill because abortion in Brazil is illegal, for instance, and except in the case that the woman was raped, so the pregnancy is the outcome of a rape. The fetus is a threat to the woman's life. in the sense that, carrying the pregnancy could bring her, very serious physical consequences. And in case the fetus doesn't have a brain, so if they can figure out. And
encephalic, I think that's the word.
Encephalic, yeah. It's similar to the one in Portuguese.
If the word comes from Greek, I know it, so.
Yes. And very likely it will be similar to that in Portuguese, similar to the original state. But so what they were trying to pass a bill that said if a woman has an abortion, even though that abortion was legal, considered legal because it's the outcome of a rape, and she does that after the 22nd week of pregnancy, she would be charged of murder one, like homicide. And she would be sentenced to a longer prison time than her rapist. And this was something that the evangelical Congress wing tried to pass. So that's how conservative they are here.
Not too dissimilar from political questions that are current in the U.S.
Yeah, this was the topic when we had to write an op-ed for Dr. Hockman's lesson. That was my topic of choice, how Jews should advocate for abortion being a legal right to every woman because, of how we view that topic. But so now that we have discussed and have a concept of what that is, so we can talk about more. What I was thinking is, for a very long time, Christians have either tried to convert Jews into their religion, especially during the Inquisition, which is something we're quite familiar with in South America, since we have many people who are descendants of the converses in Brazil. Or we were accused of killing their god, also blood libel and the killing of Christ. Why do you think we see in Brazil a movement of these neo-Pentecostal evangelical Christians trying to adopt a Jewish habits, customs, so clothes and the dress code, so to speak. And I don't know, just in general, trying to look a bit Jewish. Why do you think that happens?
I mean, that's a very hard question. So I think there are a number of things going on. And I'm not sure that the people doing it are actually aware of any of these things. But nonetheless, on the one hand, in the simplest sense, I think it is a way to contrast their approach to Christianity from what they see as the dominant model, which is Catholic. And as you said, the Catholic Church has been not well disposed to the Jewish community for nearly 2 millennia. They have not always actively tried to convert Jews. For many centuries, they operated under the ideology of St. Augustine, who said that you shouldn't try to convert Jews. That, of course, went by the wayside in the 12th and 13th century, which led to things like the conversos in Spain and the Inquisition and so on. But even in the last 4 centuries, really all the way until the 1960s, the Catholic Church just wanted to have nothing to do with Judaism, Jewish ideas, Jewish appearances. And so adopting those may be some way of trying to contrast a modern Christian identity from that. More importantly, I think it has to do with another way in which these Christians contrast themselves with the Catholic Church, which is by looking backwards and skipping the last 1800 years, as if to say these modern Christians don't want anything to do with the Catholic saints and the centuries of Catholic law and doctrinal development. They want to go right back to Jesus, right back to the very first days of Christianity. And of course, this, I believe it's in the evangelical world that the bumper stickers in America, what would Jesus do? WWJD, became popular. I don't know if they have those in Portuguese, and I'm guessing it's not those letters, but okay. But all of that is part of this idea that the real authentic Christianity is not the Catholic Church, it's Jesus and the original disciples. And of course, they were all Jews. Jesus was a Jew, Peter was a Jew, John was a Jew, Andrew, they were all Jews. And so doing Christianity in kind of a Jewishy way makes it more authentic. For Catholics, it was always the opposite. Doing Christianity in a Jewishy way was heretical and horrible and ugly. But now these people say, no, it's the authentic, original kind of Christianity. And so they want to speak Hebrew, learn Hebrew words and look Jewish and have their worship sound Jewish because that feels authentic. That's actually not brand new. That's something that started already in the Protestant Reformation, especially in the Reformed tradition of John Calvin and others, who in the 16th century were already saying, we need to rediscover kind of the origins, the Hebrew, Bible, Torah, Jewish origins of Christianity. It was done in a different way than these modern evangelicals do it, but it's not a new idea. It's been part and parcel of Protestantism in some ways for now 5 centuries.
Yeah, to me at least, well, in Brazil, it's quite modern that we see that, and I think it became even more obvious to more people after this Temple of Solomon was built.
That's a perfect example that you would call your church the ancient Hebrew Bible temple. Is something Catholics would never do in a million years, because in traditional Catholic theology, the temple has been replaced. When Jesus died, the curtain in the temple was ripped and the temple was no longer significant. It was now the sacrifice of Christ. And so, yeah, it's pretty rebellious to go and call your church Solomon's temple and make it look like Solomon's temple. But it's very similar, if you know American evangelicals, to what's called the Holy Land amusement park or something. There's an amusement park where they've reconstructed the temple in Jerusalem.
Really?
Yeah, it's in Florida. I forget what it's called, Bible Land or something like that. And it's the kind of thing the Catholic Church would never in a trillion years do, but evangelicals love doing it.
Yeah, you can see it on the screen what the Solomon temple looks like, and it's insane. Once I was flying from São Paulo to Rio de Janeiro, and it was in the evenings at 6 o'clock, something like that. It was already dark, and when I looked out the airplane window from above, I could see it. It's massive.
It's beautiful, and I whenever we see these things, I'm always like, well, I'd love to see it, but on the other hand, I don't want to actually go because then I'm kind of supporting it, but it looks awesome.
It does, and you see there's a lot of money put into it, like money, effort, time, right, into it. So I find it interesting what you say that, and it makes sense to me that they want to go back to as far back as possible to what early Christianity would look like, and Jesus was Jewish and the apostles, so we want to look like them, but then they end up looking like modern Jews in the sense that they have talis and tzitzit and the tefillin and the kippah and all the things that we have. One of my friends is an evangelical Jew, and once when I arrived at her house, she lives in an apartment, so just outside her apartment was a mezuzah, but it was stuck to the wall, not to the wooden railings, to the door frame. And I was like, no, but that's wrong. That's not where you should have it. I told
Well,
her.
but that's what's so interesting about adopting these Jewish customs, because so many of these Jewish customs, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I'm guessing the classic example is the Seder, the Passover Seder. And evangelical Christians will hold a Passover Seder as if it's something that Jesus did at the Last Supper, when most scholars will tell you that the Passover Seder was a creation of rabbinic Judaism. In other words, it was 100 years after the destruction of the temple when the rabbis were constructing the Judaism that you and I know. And that Judaism included this elaborate meal called the Seder. Whatever Jesus was doing, Passover meal, but it didn't have the basic contours of what we now associate with a Seder. And so another example would be the mezuzah you're talking about. Like, our understanding of where a mezuzah should go, what it should look like, all of that is based on how the rabbis drew it up. I don't know if we have any idea what mezuzahs looked like before the rabbis, what it meant to bind the commandments, as a sign upon your doorpost. And so a lot of these people think that rabbinic Judaism is a representation of what Judaism looked like before the rabbis. And from a historical perspective, I think they're wrong. Where it gets really fun, though, is that if I tell Orthodox Jews that the religion of the rabbis was not necessarily the same thing as Judaism before the rabbis, they'll get upset because they'll say, no, this is the oral law. This is the way Judaism has always been. So what's funny is that sometimes in explaining to evangelical Christians why what they're doing doesn't necessarily make any sense, I'm also subtly saying that Orthodox Judaism is wrong. And then I've got a battle on two fronts, and that doesn't go well.
You don't want that.
No.
Yeah, but with the mezuzah, it's quite funny because we have the podcast on YouTube as well, just the audio, but we do have that on YouTube. So we have a channel, and we also have a few videos, short videos of ourselves. And one of the videos you can see Theo, my co-host, he is singing the mezuzah to my door on the apartment where I used to live. And we have some comments of people like, oh, I'm not Jewish, but I admire Jews very much, and I'd very much like to have a mezuzah at home as well. Where can I buy one, or how can I have one? And say, well, if you're not Jewish, you don't really need it. It's like, it's not necessary that you have it. And it was quite funny because a while ago, a guy said, well, I want to have 2 of those at home, probably like the front and back doors, but I saw them on the internet and it's too expensive. What if I wrote them myself? Like, what if I copied the text myself and wrote it and said, well, but that's not what it's supposed to be. Like, you need to have it done by a professional.
A kosher cloth from a rabbi, which is the furthest thing from the ancient Christian world.
Yeah. So say you need to have it done by a professional. You need to buy it from someone who does it professionally.
The early Christians changed the date of Easter so it wouldn't be too Jewish, right? That it wouldn't be too associated with Passover. And yet here you have people saying, well, I want to have a mezuzah and I need to get a rabbi or at least a sofer, a trained scribe from the Jewish world to write the cloth to go in my mezuzah. It's bonkers.
And so he said, then he asked, like, when I said, no, you need to buy it from a professional, he said, no, but where does it say it needs to be done by a professional? Like, is it on the Torah or something like that? And I was like, you don't, I just stopped answering.
Yes.
So like, no, you don't get it. You don't get the point. But it was really funny that he wanted to write it himself, and but because of how expensive it was.
Well, I guess he's not a big donor to Solomon's temple.
Not a big one. If he's a donor, probably not a big one. But another thing that you mentioned about that Jesus was a Jew and the apostles as well. I'm going to divert on the topic just a little bit, but not too much, and then we'll go back to course.
By the way, I imagine you want to talk about Israel at some point too, because that's a part of this also. But okay, so going back to
just after this digression, we'll go to Israel. I was just at the ISGAP Summer Summit in Oxford a few weeks ago to discuss anti-Semitism. And one of the things they brought to our attention is something that had already caught my attention around 2 years ago. I am a very heavy user of Twitter. And usually around Easter and Christmas, which are major holidays in Brazil because we are a major Catholic country, people are always debating how Jesus is a Palestinian as of now. Like for the past 2 years, they've been talking about how Jesus was actually a Palestinian. And if he was alive today, he wanted to go from one place to another, he would have to do a few checkpoints and go through a few borders to go from point A to point B, which is something that I find a bit I don't know if you've heard of it, of this view of Jesus as a Palestinian.
I've heard it. Yeah. I mean, it's stupid. I don't know what else to say. Generally speaking, nothing today is like it was 2,000 years ago. Like the experience of Jews anywhere in the world is much different than it was in the first century when, let's say after the year 6 CE, Judea was a Roman province with a Roman governor. It was centered on a temple with a high priestly leadership. There were like tetrarchs out in governing Galilee and other places. It was just a completely different world. And to suggest that Jesus was a Palestinian makes absolutely no sense. And it just represents a naive understanding, not only of history 2,000 years ago, but of everything that's transpired since then in order to gain a cheap political point by somehow linking Jesus to Palestinians. By the way, you shouldn't link Jesus to Israelis either. That doesn't make it's a just totally different world. And those kinds of comparisons are crazy and drive historians nuts.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was taken aback when I saw that the first time. I was like, wow, the people, what kind of brain gymnastics are they doing to get to that concept? But
yeah, I mean, probably, to be fair, the same brain gymnastics you have to do to think of Jesus as a beautiful white man with a light brown beard and long hair, like he's from northern Germany. Yeah, that's crazy too. And, Jesus is great cultural power. And so if you can link your movement to Jesus, that's a strong thing to do. You want Jesus to look like you and be identifiable to you, but that doesn't mean it's historically accurate or historically defensible.
So we can now board Elal and hop to Israel, which is another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and evangelicals and Israel. What's the connection?
Again, it's complicated, and there's probably several things. One of them is actually related to what we were talking about, which is that it's not only evangelical Christians that in some ways pretend the last 1900 years didn't exist. In some ways, that's Zionism. That's the state of Israel. I'll make a little joke here. I don't know if it'll work in Portuguese, but when I teach my class on Jewish history at the University of Southern California, it's Jewish history from beginning to end, and I call it from Tanakh to Palmach. Tanakh meaning the Hebrew Bible, and Palmach meaning, the early Israeli fighting force. And what I'm trying to say by that is, yes, I teach Jewish history from the beginning to the end, Tanakh to Palmach. But I'm pretty sure the origin of that expression, Tanakh to Palmach, was a way of ridiculing certain modes of Zionist history or the way Judaism was taught in religious schools in America for many years, which was that first you learn about the Tanakh, then you skip to Palmach, and all the stuff that happened in between, don't worry about that. And there's a certain sense in Israel and in Zionism that we are restoring something that was 2,000 years old. We're finally back where we belong. And for people like me who like medieval Judaism and diasporic Judaism, that often gets overlooked. So that Zionist agenda of kind of reclaiming a 2,000-year-old history is precisely what evangelical Christians are doing in overlooking the Catholic Church and reclaiming the original disciples in Jesus. That's part of it. But another part of it is actually theological and rooted in the book of Revelation, the 27th and last book of the New Testament, because the book of Revelation talks about how at the end of time, there's going to be a 1,000-year period of peace, or at least a 1,000-year period of Jesus ruling the world. And there's a huge debate in the Christian world. That's called the millennium. There's a huge debate in the Christian world about when the millennium is, when it's going to happen, what it is. And the standard approach of the Catholic Church for centuries now has been that we are in the millennium. This is the 1,000-year period where Jesus rules the world through the church in Rome. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, it's been 2,000 years, so how is that 1,000 years? And the answer is it's a symbolic 1,000 years. You can ask your local bishop, that's what he'll tell you. We are in the millennium right now, a symbolic 1,000 years. But Protestants, in many cases, emerged and said, no. We're not in the millennium right now. The 1,000 years is going to happen in the future. But it can't happen. It can't happen until Jewish history ends. In other words, Jewish history, God has to reach all of God's promises and fulfillments of promises with the Jewish people. Once that happens, then Jewish history can end. And once Jewish history ends, then the millennium can happen. So many of these Christians are interested in seeing Jewish history reach its fulfillment. And that means that if God promised the Jewish people that they would have a land in the land of Israel, that has to happen in order for Jewish history to come to an end. And so for them, the creation of the state of Israel and the prospering of the state of Israel and Jews from all over the world moving back to the state of Israel, that's an indication that history is in its final hour, that God's promises to the Jewish people are reaching their conclusion. And any day now, the state of Israel is going to be complete and enough Jews are going to have moved back there. And then Jesus is going to usher in the end of history and the millennium is going to happen. So it's actually a deep theological commitment that rests in their support of Israel beyond just, the recreating of the past, which they are wont to do.
Yeah, so that explains a lot of why they're so interested in Israel. This friend I mentioned who had the mezuzah on the outside of her home, but it was on the wall. She went to Israel, and I think they have massive caravans to Israel and from Brazil.
But what's frustrating is that a lot of times Christians of this orientation have a hard time understanding diaspora Judaism. They don't understand, like, why does there need to be a thriving Jewish community in Los Angeles or in Rio, or like Jews should go where they belong, which is where God wants them, which is in Israel. And this has actually been a problem in this kind of millennial Christianity. Early on in the 20th century, I think it was 100 or so years ago, it was actually more than that, but there was famously an English aristocrat named Lord Shaftesbury. And he said, I don't want to give civil rights to Jews in England. Not because I have anything against Jews, but I want to make Jewish life in England bad so that Jews will go where they belong, which is, back then they would have called Palestine, or, the land of Israel. And there were even preachers in Southern California who said, if you're really a Jew in California, if you're a Jew and you're in Sao Paulo, like, shouldn't you move to Israel? Like, why do we even have Jews in Sao Paulo? You should be in Israel. And sometimes I have them even ask me, they're like, you're from Israel, right? How did you end up in Los Angeles? They just assume that I'm from Israel, and in the same way that an Israeli is here, doing a postdoc at Caltech, like, that's where I'm from. And I'm like, no, I was born in New York, and my father was born in New York, and his father was born in New York, and his father was born in Ukraine. But no one in my family has ever been in the land of Israel for dozens and dozens of generations, I assume. And they just don't get how that's possible or why we haven't gone back now that we can.
Mm-hmm. It happens to me sometimes. And Theo, my co-host, some people ask him sometimes, oh, so you're Jewish. Are you a Jewish from there? Like, did you come from there? And said, no, I was born in Sao Paulo. My family is from Brazil. And it's the same with me. So, my mom and my dad were born in Brazil. My grandparents, my great-grandparents came. I think not even my great-grandfather, I think he was already born in Brazil. His father came from Poland or Russia. I don't know exactly, at the time, if it was.
And when these Christians, when they find out I'm Jewish, it's never about, which synagogue do you go to? Or tell me about, Purim, or it's always, have you ever been to Israel? Did you ever live in Israel? Do you ever go to Israel? What do you know about Israeli politics? What do you think about the war in Israel? It's all, Israel is like the only thing that matters in a diasporic Jew's identity. And it can be frustrating to diaspora Jews because many of us have a chip on our shoulder because we want to establish the legitimacy of diasporic Judaism.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would like to live in Israel for some time. I think it would be interesting, but I have no desire to live there for the rest of my life.
I have lived there for a year. It was amazing. I love going to visit, but I'm invested in making a vibrant American Jewish community, and through the Z School, a vibrant international Jewish community.
Yes. Yeah, I like living in Brazil. I don't want to live for the rest of I would love to live abroad again. I like living abroad, but I love coming back. Every time I come back to Brazil, I feel so happy.
When I land on an international flight back in America, I quietly sing the national anthem to myself.
Yeah. No, not
a lot of people of my place in academia do that. I'm supposed to hate America, but I don't.
Yeah, and I love speaking Portuguese. I miss it. The thing I miss the most when I travel abroad is speaking Portuguese. Like when I live.
That's so funny. That's a difference between a Brazilian and American because
yeah.
I don't have to abandon English abroad.
Exactly.
And even when I try to, when I go to a country like Germany where I can kind of make it in German, people, they know I'm American, they immediately speak to me in English. And yeah.
Yeah, and most people don't try to speak to me in Portuguese when I'm abroad. So, but yeah, I miss it. I miss understanding the world as I do when I'm at home. I've told this story on the podcast before, but it was quite funny. I lived in England for some time, as the accent shows, and I had an English boyfriend. And once I had to go to the mail to send something back, like I bought something and I wanted to send it back. And in Brazil, it's very common that you go to the post office and you have your envelope, and they have glue at the post post office. It's a very sticky, gooey liquid glue that comes like in a brush, like it's in a pot with a brush, and it goes and it oozes, but it's great. It glues things like it's supposed to, you know. And the brush is all stiff from all the glue that it has. The brushes don't slide as they should, but it's amazing. So I arrive at the post office in England and they don't have glue, and I come back so frustrated. I think this was the greatest cultural shock I had in this relationship.
No glue at the post?
Yeah, he was like, why are you so frustrated? And I said, they don't have glue at the post office. And he said, why would they have glue at the post office? Because I need to close the envelope and send it back. He said, but why do you expect the post office should pay for everyone's glue? He's like, but it's in the price that I paid to have things mailed. And we spent a good half hour arguing how Brazil is so much better than England because we offer glue at the post office.
That sounds like a pretty normal young people argument about international differences.
It was great. And I loved living in England, and I would love to live there again if I had the chance. But I always have to bring my own glue. I was just there in August again.
You're speaking my language. I think the same thing about America. And yeah, I love other countries. I love visiting them. I love living in them. But at the end of the day, I'm an American kid.
It's not home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not home. The cultural references we have, like, I don't think Theo, the co-host, he also loves soap operas. We're just like very big fans of Brazilian soap operas. And it's something other people don't get, like how much Brazilians love soap operas. How important they are to us, how big of a part of our identity they are, that we watch that. Like, I don't know, like American football or baseball, you know?
Yeah, I mean, every place has its idiosyncrasies, and that's what makes them special.
Exactly. Just, I think to wrap things up, I just have like one last question, which is, we were talking about Israel, and you said like in the book of Revelation, how they mention that we have like this era when Jesus will come back, and the establishment of the state of Israel is a sign of that. So we say that we know that Christians are proselytists. Can we not expect them to try and convert us at some point? Or once we're all back in Israel according to their wish, are they not going to try and convert us? Like, isn't there a prize for the alleged support?
There are as many views in answer to that question probably as there are evangelical Christians. So there are those who would say, who cares? It doesn't matter. We just need to make sure Jews get back to the land of Israel so the end can come. Are they going to become Christian at the end? Yeah, probably. How's that going to happen? I don't know. God will work it out in the end. Don't worry about it. But there are, all the way on the other end of the spectrum, there are evangelical Christians, especially in America, associated with the Southern Baptist Convention movement, who, yes, think that converting a Jew to Christianity is sort of like extra points in the evangelical world. Do you know The Simpsons? Yeah, there was, so the Christian character, the evangelical Christian character in The Simpsons, Ned Flanders, he bought his kids a video game where you shoot people, but when you shoot them, they become Christian. And I'm pretty sure Jews were worth like extra points. Yeah, and there's a funny scene where the kid, he goes, "Look, Dad, I got one." And the dad goes, No, you only nicked him. Now he's a Unitarian. I don't know if that's funny in Brazil, but it was funny here. Do you know what a Unitarian is?
It doesn't make much sense. No, it doesn't make much sense. A
Unitarian is like the kind of Christian, but not really. Anyway, but I think Jews might have been worth extra points because in some people's mentality, yeah, converting a Jew is worth more points. So it's everything from don't try to convert them, get them to go to Israel. That's what's most important, and God will figure it out at the end, all the way to, converting one Jew is worth, 100 non-Jews if you can get them to Jesus, and everything in between. And by the way, a lot of that interested is based on readings of Sao Paulo himself in the 11th chapter of Romans, where he seems to talk about the fate of Jews in the end. And And the problem is, like with most of Paul's letters, it's not clear what he says. And so it can be interpreted in lots of different ways. And that's why we have so many different views.
Okay. It was just something I was curious about. And I do have one last question. I thought that was the last one, but I do have one last question, which is about people who call themselves Messianic Jews. We do have that in Brazil. It's become a trend in the last few years. Is that a thing in the US as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's mostly the extreme version of the kind of, does the term Judeophilia mean something?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so it's that kind of obsession with Judaism taken to its extreme. So not just evangelical Christians who want to play with tefillin and build a Solomon's temple, but who actually want to go all the way and say, I am basically like Peter or Andrew or John. I am like one of the original disciples in that I'm a Jew and I'm also a Christian. The problem then is that most of the Jewish affect that they show is rooted in the Judaism of the rabbis, which was the Judaism that emerged after Jesus. So I don't find it a compelling religious identity, but at the same time, I should tell you that I don't find myself as hostile to them as a lot of my peers. A lot of my peers think that they are just a threat and a menace. And I say, thank God that as Jews, we're allowed to interpret Judaism the way we want to. If that weren't the case, my reform or progressive Judaism in America would never have gotten off the ground. And I'm also a big believer in American capitalism, not only in business, but also in ideas. Let everybody say what they want. Let everybody be what they want. And the best ideas at the end of the day will win. The worst thing you can do is stifle people's ability to express themselves. Let people speak. Let people express their mind. Good arguments will win out at the end of the day. That's not always the case. Sometimes bigger guns win out at the end of the day. But in the long arc of history, ideas trump guns.
That's the moment when I say, do you know this meme where you have Patrick from SpongeBob? He is in front of the slum and he says, the starfish, and he has like praying hands and he says, gracias a Dios nací en Latinoamérica. And he said, like, thank God I was born in Latin America, because we have a much more strict policy on gun control over here.
But the government still have guns.
Which I find
matters,
Yeah, but I find that very good. And we have a few more or stricter barriers on freedom of speech. There is a justice. Well, I think we can wrap things up, and I'll thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And I'll say again, sorry Theo couldn't join us. It would have been very nice to have him as well. At the end of every episode, we usually ask our guests for a recommendation on, the topic we spoke on, a book or a film or whatever podcast. Do you have any recommendations?
I mean, it depends on what question you're thinking about. Can I email you a few books about the question of especially on evangelical Christian attitudes towards Israel? There's two or three good books that I actually just taught about this last week in the rabbinical school. And I showed them these 3 books. And
perfect, great. Yeah, you can email them to me, and I'll just put them as the recommendations. I'll just on the description of the episode, I'll write them down. Then thanks again, Josh, very much for your time and for answering all the questions. It was a pleasure talking to you. Com isso a gente termina o episódio de hoje do Torá com Fritas. Lembrando que vocês podem entrar em contato com a gente através do nosso e-mail, toracomfritas@gmail.com. Também nos seguir nas redes sociais, onde estamos no Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, sempre @toracomfritas. Para não perder nenhum episódio, é só assinar o nosso feed no seu tocador de podcasts preferido. E lembrando que o Torá com Fritas é feito por mim, Angela Goldstein, junto com o Theo Hotz, que idealizamos e apresentamos o podcast. O Alu é o nosso editor de som, intérprete da nossa música de abertura. Para entrar em contato com ele, é só procurar no Instagram pelo @aludesempre ou @aluprodu, e a nossa identidade visual é da Iramaia Batalha. Muito obrigada a todo mundo que ficou com a gente até agora.
Muito obrigado e até a próxima.